below replacement is our fertility rate. I think it's like 1.7. You need to be at like 2.2 or higher to ensure that like your civilization continues. And for people who, to dive into that, for every 2 people have 1 kid, that's not good enough because they're both going to die. So if everyone keeps that up, so you need to have more than 2 kids on average, and we are not doing that.
I'm Miriam Hoffman, a full-time college student living in Carbondale, Illinois, and you're listening to the Vance Crow Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm glad you're here. Today, we talk with a guy that plays chess, was a heavyweight boxer, goes around and gives talks, and grew up in the projects. His name is Ed Latimore, and I encountered him because he talks all about stoicism and writing, and he's just a really interesting character. So we sat down and talked about some of his theories about what growing up in the projects did for him, and how he got into boxing, how the underworld of boxing works to make money, promoters and all that stuff. And then we get into topics like red pills and why men in our country are being unfairly having the floor tilted against them. This is a little bit edgy of a conversation. May not, if you have young children around, want to have them listen to it. We don't talk in graphic detail, but sex is mentioned. And I think it's a pretty fun and interesting conversation. So you should definitely hang around. This is going to be a good one. One of the things I mentioned in the last podcast is that I'm putting together some of the classes that help people become a tangibly better speaker, and I'm going to be publishing those. There's 2 ways that you can get involved. One, if you'd like to be one of the people that I use as my test case, the group of people that I show my first draft of my classes to, then you can join the Articulate Ventures Network, and actually I'll give you direct feedback, stuff that normally clients pay me to do. I actually use this group to help me hammer on my ideas. Or you may just want to wait until the classes come out. They'll be starting to come out in the next 2 to 4 weeks. And there'll be everything from how to introduce yourself in a semi-formal situation so that people are interested and want to learn more about your business and how you work, or negotiations, how to make it so you can create win-win situations and become far more comfortable with conflict. Next month, I'm going to be working on a class about how to explain your research in a way that makes people want to listen to it and understand it. And I'm looking for a few people inside of the network to help me work out some of these ideas. So we'll be asking you to give a talk and then giving you feedback on what you can do to get better. And I'll give a little bit of a lesson. If these are things you're interested in, either go to network.articulate.ventures to sign up to become a member of the network, or sign up for the website, sign up for emails where we'll let you know as these classes come out. And you can do that by going to vancecrow.com/podcast. And now, without further ado, on to my man, Ed Latimore. Ed Latimore, welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, thanks for having me. It's a good time. I'm sure we're gonna end up talking about some really cool stuff since we had to cut our conversation short to get the podcast started right now on time.
So I was watching some of your videos, and you're unique in that you're very forward about talking about how you came from the projects, and you made a very clear distinction between the projects and the ghetto. And I think just for our audience, we can get into where you're at now, a chess master, former heavyweight boxer. But you started out in the projects. What in the world was that like? Why were you there, and how did you get out?
Why was I there? Just strolling around, wandered into the projects, never got out. No, I was born there. I'm a product of what we consider, I guess, a single mom. Like, I knew my dad, but I mean, to say he had a hand in raising me is just inaccurate and really does a disservice to my mom. But he was not a ghost. Like, I wasn't a bastard in that sense. So I guess maybe I spent, I'd see him like 4 times a week. 4 times a year, and really only like 1 or 2 days. And then as we got older, I would like go for the summer, but I think that only happened like once or twice. And at home though, we lived in public housing. My mom was on welfare for a while until she got a job, but that didn't happen. A full-time like job, that didn't happen until I was in high school, and by that point working on myself. So I didn't really, need that. But everything you hear about the that environment is fairly accurate. I had the typical project experience, crackheads, gang members everywhere, violence. I fought a lot until I got to high school where I went to a high school across town. And you see a lot of stuff that you think is normal until you go around people who don't live there. You're like, oh, it's not normal to be getting your ass kicked. Like, I remember I had an experience where I said to a kid, I said, well, how many times you guys been in fights? And they looked at me like, what? I remember I got embarrassed, man. Like my friend came over and my mom whooped my sister's ass, man. I was like, whoa, this is, because they were like these are upper middle class people, the high school I went to. They don't know anything, man, like that. Like they know this stuff the way like I know about prison through the media. Like they don't know, no, but I'm living it every day, and it's just like, okay, whatever. But it's one of those experiences. The way I describe it is, it's an education you can't pay for, and it's something you can't learn. You can only be taught. But I'm very careful to not say that, oh, because of this harsh environment, that's how you make someone amazing. Like, no, man, I'm a clear case of survivor's bias. Like for every one of me, there's a bunch of dudes in jail, still there. Again, we got a girl pregnant early, all that stuff. I made it out because I had a really good combination of some things that I can't control. I'm always very cognizant and appreciative of those things. I had a mom who really, she did a lot of stuff wrong, but she did a lot of things right. She put some discipline in the house. I didn't want to get my ass kicked by my mom, and that's probably important. She exposed us to books. We had a saying in the house that a book is a treasure, and she always was reading a bunch of like fiction, and not the trashy fiction. Like my mom loved like Stephen King and what is his name, James Patterson and Dean Koontz. I'm like I don't read these guys. I just know those names from seeing that on the bookshelf. But that got us in the books, and she did her best with what she had, and I've got to think the natural kind of temperament that I have, that kept me from falling into the crowd. I was never really popular. I liked video games to begin with. That really helps, being an outcast when you're younger. Really came back to help me. Being ugly helped when I was a kid because, no girls wanted to mess with me, so I never had a chance to get anybody pregnant. Dude, I'm being so serious. Whereas I'm crazy. I had a nickname. It's actually, I had a nickname when I was a kid. I don't know if you remember the Michael Crichton novel they turned into a movie, Congo. The kids called me that because I looked like an ape, they said. And so like that was like the name I had in my housing project. People like, I'll run into people today and they'll say that. And now I'm vastly different. And I was just ignore that shit. Like, you gonna recall me with my name, and I'm 36 years old. This was, but that kind of stuff goes on. But I'm grateful for it because it's very easy to fall and stay with what you're familiar.
And so you ultimately became a heavyweight fighter. I mean, I even got to see some of your professional rounds where you were really beating on some dude.
Yeah, the boxing thing is a really. Because typically when you have someone with my background, it's like, oh, he must have been boxing to get out of all that. Like, nah, man, I didn't start fighting until I was 22. And it's because I mean, the story I tell people, and this is true, I was dating this girl, and I had at this point been kicked out of college the first time. Oh, it was more like when you're about to get fired and you go, you can't fire me, I quit. That's really what it was like. Like I left, took off, and I was on this real big anti-college rant. And I would talk about it to anybody that would listen. And this person, though, this girl I was dating, her mother was a college professor of biology. So that didn't go over well. And one day she said to me, she goes, okay, let's pretend that you're right and college is worthless. I was 22. She goes, what have you done for the past 5 years or past 4 years other than show up to my house and eat my food? And I was like, ouch. And then she threw me out, right? but she threw me out, but it got me thinking. I was like, man, I really don't have any sweat equity in this world in anything. And so this was back when YouTube was getting big. I remember looking at fights, and I said, you know what? I can try that. It was either out of the military, so I went and started fighting, and I had some early success and just kept building and building. Lucky breaks in a few places that just set me up and set me up. I mean, I worked extremely hard and took some risks that paid off, but fighting probably one of the best things to happen to me, because not just for the discipline aspect. I wasn't even the most disciplined amateur, at least anyhow. I was mostly a drunk when I was an amateur. That I would fight, drink, right. But one of the things it taught me was, it really taught me the power of being likable, because what you have to do as a fighter to survive in the local circuit is you need to convince people to come and spend money to see you do this. But you can't be a pushover. You got to be likable, but you got to be yourself. You got to be unique and interesting. And ideally, if you do this correctly, if you do your job correctly, they're not even really going to get a full night of entertainment. You should go in there and eliminate the guy and be done. Sometimes they got to drive over an hour to come see this. So to get somebody to part with 30 minimum, most shows, some shows 50, and do it so you're in a good grace with the promoter to get put on a show, as an amateur and a professional, people gotta support you. So they gotta like you. And that really taught me a lot about the people aspect of business, which is what everyone, anyone can crunch numbers. Hell, a computer can crunch numbers, but what are you doing with the humans? And that really taught me the value of people in that boxing.
Oh, that blows my mind, because I was doing jiu-jitsu before COVID, and you're right. There are some guys that are like, "Oh, come to my match." And you're like, "Man, I don't want to come to your match." And then there's some guys where you're like, "I would trip over, large objects. I'd do anything I could to get there because I love that guy. I want to see him win. And if I can't make it, I'm going to watch it online." And 100%. But it never dawned on me that if you were going to make it as a professional fighter, that being likable or being somebody people wanted to root for is really important.
Check it out. Here's what there's a few routes to a career as a professional. This is not so much in the amateurs, because there's other routes that don't require such charisma in the amateurs. But in the professionals, if you're matching with guys and you're developing, so you're not fighting good guys, you're moving up. And what they have to do, what a promoter has to do in a local show, if you're not signed to a big promoter that has the resources, the TV dates, the money, etc., is he's got to cover you, your purse, and your opponent's purse. And the idea is that you sell enough tickets to make that happen. But if you can't do that, then you're in a weird position. You still can fight, but no one can really afford to put you on as the A side, where they're selecting a guy in development. So what you do is you get selected as the B side. And the B side is a really bad place to be when you're developing, because there's only really two outcomes as the B side. Well, okay, three, but the third one is okay. One, you go and you start building up a losing record, and you start being known as you're going to be known as the can. You're going to be the guy they call to develop other guys they put money in to, right? Then there's the other path, which is you're actually better than they thought, and somehow they missed you, and you upset one of the guys. And now they're like, okay, do we sign this guy or not? Because they're not going to sign you outright. What they're going to do is they're going to put you up against another tougher guy. They're going to see how you do. Now, if you make it through that gauntlet, then you're good. Then you're going to get signed, and you're in a different position. But no one gets to that gauntlet. These are smart guys. People don't realize. But the same freaking 3-4 guys been running boxing for the past 40 years, and they're like Harvard educated dudes, man. Like, it is not, Harvard educated dudes are criminals. Don King, Richard Schaefer, the Finkels. These are like, what the hell? I can't even go. Al Heyman. These are like smart guys with connections, and they know this game inside and out. So very rarely is someone surprised. Like when you come in on the B side, you're supposed to be beat. Okay. Now, how badly you get beat is determined by the quality of the A side guy that they're bringing up. But they know you're supposed to lose. And if you win, you don't really win. The other guy just loses. He might lose his contract or something. They're not like, oh, you beat him, we're gonna take you in with your 4-15 record. Like, no, there's nothing they can do with that. They can't market you. They're like, all right, we'll call you back when we need another guy. But now you're not gonna get as many calls because now you're too dangerous.
So how was your path, man? That's so much more convoluted.
Path? Here is the path that is supposed to happen. And this is okay. So I'm going to tell you a little secret about boxing. Anybody can be professional in boxing. It's not like the other sports where there's a drafting process. All you can do is you just go down and say, I want to fight professional. And you'll become a professional. Or rather, you'll be an amateur until that bell rings. Like, you could decide you're going to walk to the ring and then get up there, and quiver, shit your pants and decide that's not what you're going to do. Okay? But what the purpose of the amateurs are to do, when you do this, you skip the amateurs. What the amateurs are supposed to do, they're supposed to teach you the game. It's supposed to give you a chance to earn some accolades, maybe win a national title, get on the Olympic team, get a national ranking, do something so that when you turn professional, you have some bargaining chips to get a promoter. Because remember, there are more networks than promoters. So they have their pick of who to work with. There are fewer networks than promoters. That's what I'm going to say. There's only like 6 networks, and I might be overshooting that show boxing. There are more promoters, right? But the promoters, there are so few promoters relative to the fighters, and the promoters are how the fighters get on the networks, right? And so they have their choice. So you got to have something to make them go, we want to work with you. We want to work with you. We want to work with you. And you get that by your amateur career. Or you do a hell of a job upsetting a few people as a pro. What I did, I had a great amateur career. I did everything you could do as an amateur, sure to go to the Olympics. Yeah, right. I didn't go to the Olympics. And that sucks to me, but it happens. But when you do that, when you get a national title, when you fight some top guys who go on to have good pro careers or do something else in amateurs, then when you start talking to a manager, someone who these promoters will pick up the phone for, right? Because everybody wants a promoter, so you got to have somebody who's going to pick up the phone. Or who has enough clout that we're going to, all right, we'll talk to this guy. I'm fortunate that I lived around the Yankello family. Tom Yankello, the trainer, Mark Yankello, the manager. So Mark Yankello had the connections with my amateur record. You got to have the sauce. You got to have something there. And then you go market with a manager. And he was able to get me signed to Rock Nation Sports after my 6th pro fight. But that's not common. Or rather, that's what's supposed to happen. But a lot of guys, they're not patient, especially guys who start fighting later, man. I've heard guys say, I don't want to fight for prizes. I want to fight for money. And I'm like, if only you knew how little money there really was here. You change your mind.
So how did your career then go? How long did you stay in?
I was fighting. My last fight was December 16th or 17th, 2006. And that fight ended in a draw, and that was off my first loss, September 23rd, 2016. It's crazy how you remember these dates, because I can go look them up whenever I want to on BoxRec. But I took a year off, and I said I'm going to go finish my schooling and just focus on that, because I had been, as a pro, I was in school at the same time and in the Army at the same time. I never really got a chance to just train as a pro, which I'm so like at the time that felt miserable. I am so happy I did that though, and put myself through it now, because now, a lot of my life is an indirect result of doing those extra things. But I had my last fight on December 2016. I was slated to come back in 2018 to fight, because I took that whole 2017 off, knocked out a bunch of credits, and almost done with my degree. And I got injured while I was sparring, and I said, what am I doing? Because at this point, an interesting thing happened in 2017 and 2018. I figured out how to make money online, and my writing started to get popular, and people started to find out. And so I'm sitting here. I remember May is when I graduated. May of 2018. right? May of 2018 is when I graduated. That was the same month that I got the injury sparring. I was preparing to fight a guy in New Zealand for my comeback fight. Got this injury, had to pull out the fight. And I'm like, what should I do? I'll just heal and come back. And my coach calls me and he's like, what are you doing? You just got, because I just finished my degree in physics, which is like not hard or not easy. I mean, got that. But I'm also making I think that was my first, it was my first 10,000 plus month and first 10,000 plus week. And so I'm like, okay, well, I probably will go travel or do something. It was a good time. And you know, because when you fight, you don't really get a chance to relax because it's a weird life. You need to be at your best anyhow. Some guys will just take time off and only show up in the gym 8 weeks before a fight. My coach wasn't having that. I wasn't having that. And so you're in there all the time training and being in shape, which is what I would have to do. And you know, this life I live now of pretty much being able to get on a plane and go wherever I want or stay in Europe for months at a time, that would be non-existent. So I just waited out and I said, you know what, I got a lot out of this game, like probably more than most people get, because I was in a great situation as an amateur after a 3-year amateur career. I got lucky and I ended up in a program that paid me to train for the Olympic trials. And then as a pro, I had a bit of a rough start financially, but I got signed to Rock Nation and that cleared that up. Plus I was getting money from the military. I said, okay, I've had a really good run, like a good enough run at least. Let's go do something else and see where that goes.
I mean, I'm afraid to ask you because you like dropped all these little things in there, like that you studied physics and that you were in the Army. But like the thing that I really want to get to is I heard you giving a talk that I think a lot of people would be really surprised by, and it was about the how boys are being raised in the United States and kind of the red pilling and how that's important. And so I'm totally down with people looking up your bio, but I think you've got a lot to say about red pill that is going to shock a lot of people.
Yeah, so here's the thing about the red pill and a lot of the ideas around it.
What is the red pill for people that don't know? You use a lot of jargon in your talk that I think people on the inside know what they're talking about, but other people wouldn't.
Okay, so I'm going to use the jargon as it's intended and then describe it that way. And we may not get to why I need to make that distinction, but we'll see. So red pill is understanding the true nature of intersexual dynamics. Okay? And the problem today is that a lot of intersexual dynamics is just being outright misfed to us, or being lied to for many reasons, in many ways. And you kind of see this when you look at some raw numbers. We're below replacement and people aren't dating anymore. And below replacement is our fertility rate. I think it's like 1.7. You need to be at like 2.2 or higher to ensure that like your civilization continues. And for people, to dive into that, for every 2 people have 1 kid, that's not good enough because they're both going to die. So if everyone keeps that up, so you need to have more than 2 kids on average. And we are not doing that. Not only are we not doing that, we're having them later, much later. And this is what the talk focused on. Society is, it's a pendulum swing. Some would argue not really, and I'm starting to shift into the not really camp. We aren't honoring the differences in the men and women. We're treating boys like defective girls, and we're treating girls like they should be exactly the same as guys. And it is creating this weird world where no one really, certainly under 25, and just because of the nature of my life, I've had the ability to talk and interact with a lot of them. Dating is very different than it was even when I was 25, and I'm 36. So 11 years ago, things really changed, and the things that changed, Tinder. I was a dog, man. Like I'm telling you, before I met my girl, I was a dog. I was on every app, right? And Tinder happened so fast, I never had a Tinder. Not because I'm better than Tinder, it just wasn't around yet. We've been together for 8 years. So it's a quick change. And it changed the dating landscape. You're not talking to people directly. anymore, right? You're not walking up and approaching. The whole rite of passage for a guy to go get shot down by a girl or have to talk to her father when he calls the house, days is over, man. And on top of that, women are now being encouraged to embrace and flaunt their sexuality without considering, like, perhaps, what is that old saying? Don't rip down a fence if you're not exactly sure why I was there in the first place. Well, we don't really people are starting to learn that, maybe that's not now what they do with it, whether they decide that this whole culture of the Me Too movement and and trust me, I'm not one of those guys that say they didn't do it. I say this. You look at Hollywood and there's a bunch of names. If it was really a witch hunt, right? Like, which can go after all these guys, everybody would be up there. Nah, there's like a few dudes and then a bunch of stories come up. So you probably should at least, where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm that kind of guy. With that said, one of the things I said when Harvey, and I know I'm jumping off on a tangent, but I'll jump back in. One of the things I said about the whole Harvey Weinstein thing was, well, why don't we talk to the actresses that got the part, right? Why don't we see? Because look, and no one wants to have that conversation, but that conversation is part of what I'm talking about. Is that we have tried to blur our differences to androgyny, but human nature is like, I know 50 years been good, but I've been around for millions evolving, and I'm gonna do what I do. And whenever I got a chance, and we used to have kind of a system in place to deal with that. And now you're crazy for suggesting it. So what I talk to, I can't talk to what it's like to be a woman. At the very least, I have my ideas what I think women should be, but who's going to, listen to me, whatever, right? I'm a guy. What I am, though, is a guy. So I can talk to guys and I can speak to their issues and do my part there as far as helping us out. Because I think guys are getting the short end of the stick, not just directly, in terms of some of the legislation and the way medicine is handled. If you watch a speech, I talked about how guys are like 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD and custodial. When parents are awarded custody in a split, women get it like 80-something% of the time. And the suicide rate for men is insane, not just in general, but especially after a breakup. I mean, and no one talks about these things because why should they? We're guys. We're toughen up. One of the burdens of masculinity is you don't complain, right? To the point that even if you complain about legitimate stuff, other guys are like, man, shut up. Like, we're not trying to hear that weak stuff. But someone's got to talk about it. And I'm in a position where no one can call me, weak. My resume is there. I've clearly risen to the challenge many times in my life as a man, so I can talk about these things that are important to me. Because ultimately what happens if we don't cater to young men is they grow up to be adults. And all of a sudden your daughters don't have a suitable mate. Or you have a guy that's obsessed with porn and OnlyFans and then promotes that culture that makes your daughter go, there's money there. Okay. Or you have guys that aren't capable of defending themselves against guys that didn't get that home training, because there's always wolves out there, So someone needs to talk to guys, and that's just the direct hit. We're not talking about the porn and the video games. It's huge industry, and it's not even so much the video games. The video games are, I don't play them, but I can understand how one gets into them. Okay. But the porn is a big deal because porn is a single missile that breaks off into many. It's a scatter bomb. It comes at you and you think, oh, it's just something I'm gonna sneak away and do, but your brain treats it like any other addiction. It's one of those things. Porn is unique in its addiction qualities or its use in that, unlike other drugs, porn is not a social drug. You can slink away, do it. No one knows you do it for years. You ain't never seen most crackheads smoke together. People use together, right? No guys are getting together and let's go watch some porn together. No, it's the thing that's done in shame. It's in the dark. It ruins relationships because of that. So once again, we're coming back to what happens when no one talks to guys and tries to help them deal with the issues. This society is deemed unimportant. Well, society starts to collapse. And it's hard, man. And it's very hard because there's not a lot of credit even given anymore to being a good man. All masculinity is lumped in to toxic. too.
Yeah, I think that there's like huge social forces that are going on that have changed the fabric of society. And like you had said, we're not able to talk about these things. And one of the thoughts that I have about human nature is we don't really need soldiers in the same way that we used to. Like once we had the atomic bomb, then the way that society started to deal with the fact that, like it used to be, so we talk about on this podcast a theory called bare branches theory, which is what happens to a society when you have so many single men that because they have no chance of getting married. They either haven't been able to collect enough resources, they haven't been, there's one man that's getting several women, and so there's like not a good balance. Then you start having an unstable society, and that unstable society, like in ancient times, you'd have banditry, you'd have people being robbers, you'd have militaries forming, and so countries used to go start frivolous wars to go have those soldiers die, and then the ones that came back, they had a selection pressure. Those are going to be the strongest ones, the leaders. They're going to be integrated back into society. But now you don't have that with the atomic bomb, like. Now we've got a thing. We've never been able to get rid of this, and we're not dealing with the problem.
Bombs, drones. I always tell people, boots on the ground combat between two developed nations that we'll never see it again. We'll never see something like World War II again, or World War One. The next war, if we have, because I was talking to someone about this today. The global economy and telecommunications has really taken the what's the word I want? Incentive out of combat. Not to mention life is very comfortable. No one wants to go fight, right? They talked about this in when you enlist in basic training, the first week you watch a bunch of videos. They call it death by PowerPoint. And one of the things that stood out to me, even though this was 8 years ago, actually, one of the things that stood out to me was that the number of stress fractures increased linearly from 1985 on for people who enter basic training. And they raised this point about being in shape and training. But they also correlated that. They called it the Nintendo year. That's the year Nintendo came out. So more kids were being less active. So when they tried to go do something like enlist, they weren't ready to fight. But that bare branches theory, you know what else happens? There's two ways that, like you said, the war thing, we don't have war anymore. Instead, we got the video games, Call of Duty, porn. We have a way to escape. For some guys, that ain't good enough. And you know what you get? You get the Alex Manassians. You get the guy that just did Colorado. You get the guy who was in I can't remember his name, but shot at Virginia Tech. You get the who else was motivated? The guy down in the Parkland shooter. These guys are motivated a lot of times by lost love. Anders Luberson. I hope I said his name right. The guy in Europe who flew that plane.
Are you saying these people are motivated by lost love? Is that what you just said?
They have mentioned it. That it's part of the incel movement. Guys that can't get laid anymore.
I mean, it's a serious problem. And
Elliot Rodger had a whole manifesto about it. So society, and I don't know if they're ever going to get to talking about it. They probably won't because it'll be something else other than the obvious. Just like, I'll never forget because I'm sober and I'm really big about talking about it. I'm not like an evangelist trying to stop drinking. But if someone wants to talk to me about it, I tell them what I can. Got a lot of articles on my website about it. I wrote a book about it. And when I was researching a section for my book, I called it "The Drunk Elephant in the Living Room." I didn't include it because I didn't want people to be distracted by this point. But one of the stories I found, they were the people on Stanford's campus. They were dealing with another sexual assault, and turns out there was alcohol involved. And in most of these assaults, alcohol was involved, to the point where I crunched numbers based on some data that's out there on a number of sexual assaults reported and the percentage who admit to drinking in surveys. And what I roughly came up with in my rough statistics math, and I'm not bad at math, I'm good enough to get a physics degree, so I know there's some rigor here. If you removed alcohol from the equation, you would eliminate about 95% of all sexual assaults. But what do they focus on when they talk about the sexual assaults? They talk about tell boys not to do it. They don't mention that most of these things that are occurring are happening when both parties are ingesting a substance that is proven to, in girls, totally ruin their ability to read signs and guys, and it actually does it both. You can't read signs about what's going on, so she may be thinking one thing, but her body language is presenting another, and he's misinterpreting it. And no one knows. And then on top of that, you sober up and you feel regret, and that's a whole different thing entirely. But because we don't want to talk about the actual problem, we can't solve it. And the actual problem, if you look at the numbers, is the alcohol involvement. But instead, they shift the problem to make it sound like it's a guys not being trained right issue. And that's just one example. And that's the same thing I think they're going to continue to do because when you look at, these guys they write manifestos, they talk about what's wrong, and no one talks about it. Or when they do, they go, oh, some guys that couldn't get laid, yada yada, right? But if it keeps happening, then what? Is it? I don't know what the solution is. But it's clear we have a problem, and we know what that problem is, which is supposed to help you solve if humans approach things logically, but we don't do that often.
Yeah, there's something really that happens that's rather profound when a man and a woman get married or they become long-term partners, is that men end up way lowering their aggression, the reckless behaviors that they have, the risk-taking behaviors that they have. Because you've already done the actions that you needed to rise up the hierarchy to find a mate, and then you don't need to keep expressing those. But if what we're doing is we're making it so people can't find a mate, or that the social structures are set up that it's really unlikely, then they're not going to lower those risk-taking behaviors. And then we're going to be like, look at that monster. He's took all these risks, or he did these terrible things. Therefore, we should punish all men, or then paint them with that brush. And we're really like, we're not looking at what's actually happening, and really, like, truly the sad thing. I had a commercial sex worker on that goes by Ayala Girl, and she really talked with a great deal of pity and empathy about the men that contract her to have sex. And she's saying these people are lonely. These people aren't like hiring a prostitute because they just love prostitutes. I mean, surely there are some, but there are a lot. The only way they can get affection and respect and somebody caring about them is to pay for it, because the avenues where they earned it are not as plentiful as they once were.
I think about this all the time. I was one of those guys. I used to say, man, if it was you guys can't get laid, just hire a prostitute. It's not about that. It's not about the sex. The sex is it's quite literally a cherry on top. In the best way analogy I can make, a metaphor. The real thing that guys want, they want female validation. They want the affection. They want the companionship. The sex is, that just comes with it, right? Well, one of the things I tell my girl all the time is, you got to understand that I like you. Like, I'll fall in love with you just by banging you a few times, but I like being around you, and that's why I'm still here. And that's what holds the relationship together. I mean, how you looked is what made me initially start talking to you, but I'm still here because we've got shared memories now. I can't replace the time, right? So there's a real bond that goes on that people are looking for, but they have made our society so counter-conducive or anti-conducive to this bond being formed. I think it's crazy that, like, the number of girls, for example, who think it's foolish to have kids so early or to be in a relationship. But we naturally want relationships. It's not to have that be removed or have them only try to consolidate on a few select guys, which is what happens, right? What we were saying in the branches theory, the modern version of that are the guys with blue check marks on Instagram or a bunch of money. It's the modern version of the warlords or the lords who have all these
they have a harem,
or harem, yeah. Same difference now. The difference now, though, is that the girls don't get anything out of it except nothing. They just get used up, and then eventually some guy will be happy. But
so to put you on the spot a little bit, you've mentioned your girlfriend several times. 8 years you're together. Why not married?
What's funny? Why not married? Okay, so this is I almost said proud of myself, but I don't think most people are gonna be like, this is something to be proud of. So When we first started dating, I think it was about 2 years in, we had the conversation, and I said, I don't think marriage is my thing. I'm not interested. If this is a problem, this is probably a good time for you to leave. Okay. And it was kind of depressing, whatever, but it was okay. She deals with it because she likes me, and I still bring value, and I present the argument that like my time here is more proof than any ring I could give you or any commitment because I'm still here, right? We've known people in the 8 years we've been together who have gotten married and divorced, right? So time in matters because it's easy to dissolve that certificate. And then some more time went on, and I was like, all right, well, I'm not going anywhere. It's probably around like year five, about five and a half, year six, because I looked around because that was right around the time where I graduated, and I was like, I would see stuff, and it's like, yeah, I could really like go on a tear, and it'd be a good time for a little while, but they can't cook, they're stupid. Then I have to like learn stuff about them. Like now, like I know my girlfriend's like buttons. Like I kind of know what to do. She knows, mom. I notice she's pressing them out. Something's up, and we need to deal with that. And I expect, she's got the right personality for me. The odds of finding out again, yeah, I'd be able to. But do I really want to go through all that, man? I might fucking die tomorrow or something. So this year, or rather last year, we were in Portugal, and she's a Portuguese citizen. So she wasn't on the clock. I was very much on the clock. I had to leave in 6 months. Otherwise, I'd risk not being allowed back in the EU. And I said, this is dumb. We've been together this long. Why am I not married to you? Because it would be a lot easier at this point because we could just stay in Europe. And so actually this Christmas, I gave her a ring. Beautiful emerald ring. And I said, all right, now we just got to decide the best way to do this. I'll probably figure out, because I hate weddings, like fundamentally just they bug me. But,
why do you hate weddings? This is fascinating. Why?
You know why? Because it's a lot of attention for something that's already been going on, right? It's not like back in the old days where it was two families coming together for the first time, and then a couple had sex and nothing like that, and half your family was meeting her for the first time. Now it's a holdover from a different time where it meant something different. Okay. Now I feel weird asking people to give up a whole Saturday to come celebrate a relationship that realistically will be at least 9 years old by the time it happens, probably maybe a decade. There's that. Two, I hate the attention for it. Like I don't mind the attention when I've earned it. I was talking to my girl about this.
So you'll invite people if you've been boxing, but not to get
because
married.
I've earned the fight. Yeah, that's a lot of I did a lot of training for that. This I just had to not fuck up. Pretty much.
I mean, I think that marriages are hard, like being with somebody. So my only pushback on that would be when I got married, I really thought it was about me and the woman I was marrying. And I really had this very modern, updated, it's about us. And I have come to the realization that it is not that what it really is you saying to other people, hey, we want you to be included in on the fact that we have said something that we're not going to leave each other, and we want you to hold us to that. And if we want you to hold us to it, then we might as well have a celebration about it.
Yeah, you know what? That is the last wedding I went to. I went to a friend's wedding about a month ago, and I almost said no. I say no to a lot of wedding invites because I don't like them. But I've been, this has been a guy that supported my boxing career, and I've known him probably the second or third person I've known longest in my life. And I said, let me go. And the person who did the ceremony said something very similar to that. And I remember I actually said to her when I got back, I said, my mindset's changed a little bit about weddings, but then that led to a whole argument, and then I had to, but ultimately, no, I think we'll get married. But what I don't want to do is, I don't want to wait, because for me, I'm practical as all get out to the point where it's kind of a problem. But I've been reading a lot of Chris Voss and how to negotiate, and so I was able to like present my case a little better and make her feel better about it. But for me, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get my ability to be a resident in Europe out of this without paying for it. Like that's what I get for this. Because normally,
you're a romantic, I see.
Oh yeah, you know. But at the end of the day, for me, and this is why I'm fine with saying that without any problem. I say it to her all the time. I want to make it clear because at the end of the day, what I've given you outweighs any you know a certificate or a trinket. Is my time and my commitment here. Like and I enjoy it, and I have a great day every day with her. Even when she's in her bad mood, she's fairly quick to. I mean, unless I like did something legitimately wrong, and I'm self aware enough to know like I'm not a pighead in that sense. I know because I tend to think about that, and I think that's one of the reasons why our relationship works so well is because I put a lot of effort into reading the people around me, but also being self-aware. So I know if I messed up and I need to have a talk, or if she just needs to be ignored. And sometimes she just needs to be ignored, but if I really made a mistake and I think about it and I go, okay, and we talk it over. So I'm in a great position in this relationship, and I am gonna marry her because you know what else too? We just got back from vacation, and everybody kept calling me Mr. Harrison. I was like, God, I'm no or I call it I'm instead of her being Miss Latimore, I'm Mr. Harrison. I'm like, oh yeah, this is annoying. Like I remember I was like fundamentally because it's happened before whenever we drive, but this time I was like annoyed by it. I was like, yeah, we're gonna fix this.
So what I thought you were gonna say is that the institution of marriage in the U.S. is like really not an even playing field. And the more that I've talked with men that have gotten divorced, like for me and my wife, like I'm certain that we're gonna go the distance. Like a really horrible hell thing would have to happen for my wife to leave me, and I'm not leaving her. But I know a lot of people that have been divorced, and the man got taken to the cleaners and is
another area
servant.
of that. Yeah. That now here's what I'll say about that. I'll say two things. One, no one gets in their car thinking they're going to get into a collision, but you wear that damn seatbelt, right? To me, look, I told her, I said, once again, no bones about it. I said, we're going to get a prenup. Because if this doesn't work out, I don't want to have to seriously sit and debate killing you, because she was telling me a story about the alimony and the child support combination that her sister's new husband has to pay his ex-wife. It was something like it ended up being like $15,000 a month, okay, and he's like in his 50s. So I was like, I said, when she told me, I said, okay, he's over 50. That means realistically, he ain't gonna like the odds are not for him getting another 25 years out of the planet just because that's the average life expectancy. He's got enough money where he might be able to get off. That sounds like an easy expected value problem to just kill her. Like, and I mean, not like with his bare hands, like you gotta hire and do it right, but like. And so I said to her, I said, we're going to get a prenup because I don't want to ever have to really think about that. And I would think about that because I'll be damned if we break up and the government says I got to pay you and you got another man. Nah, one of us got to go, and it ain't going to be me. I am very far from that guy that would offer myself. So yeah, there you go.
I think the thing that scares me, and not for my own self, but for the people that I know that have gotten divorces, like when there are children involved, and like you said, the wife gets the children 80% of the time because there's still we've made all these other updated beliefs about the egalitarianism of the world and that women and men are equal, but when it comes time for the child, unless the woman has like a certifiable, she's a
crackhead and she comes into the courtroom with the crack pipe.
Right, like, and then like you have these
is there crack in that right now, or was it? No, it's crazy. But this is what I'll say about that. you got to remember something about this whole movement and movements in general. No one fights to a draw. A draw is something they accept. What they really want is to destroy and win. It may not. Now, I'm using malicious language to make a point, but outside of that point, now that I have your attention, when you look at the numbers, women are kicking our ass in every area except one notable one. There's still more male CEOs and that almost certainly has to do with the continual uninterrupted timeline you have to put in to be a CEO of something. But in terms of graduation rates from high school and college, bachelor's degrees, higher level degrees, masters and PhDs, entry level employment, they're killing us, and no one wants to talk about that. It's no longer a thing about equality. It's about where are we not winning and how can we win there, and where we already are winning, how can we destroy and dominate. And what I mean by the first thing is there's this huge movement to try and push girls, more women into the T and the E of STEM, technology and engineering, right? But they're not really interested. And we know this not from any type of science study on our brains or from anecdotals. No, we've got the data from Norway where they have one of the most egalitarian pushes. Like literally, they can do whatever they want. And women just don't go into those fields. They're not interested. But what they're trying to do here is they're trying to push. Okay? That's the first area. And then the other one where you can dominate, it's still, I went and spoke at this program. I was very grateful for this program that I was in middle school. And they wanted to bring back some of the alumni to speak to the kids. And I had a woman actually pull me aside and say, before I spoke, it goes, the girls are doing great, but if you can talk to some of the guys or tailor your message towards them, that would be fantastic. And that was the first time I'd ever heard a woman admit that they are killing us, and it's still presented as if it's a man's world. Women spend more money, they buy more. I mean, they have all the consumer power, okay, all the academic power. If you say something wrong or even remotely off color in a workplace, they have the power to erase you. Vice versa, not so much.
Yeah, I've worked in several environments where, like, because I'm in communications, right? So there's a lot of women in that field. And, like, the things that women said to me, if I said them back to women, or if I said them as, like, a joke, or I made, like, women have made jokes about their periods in front of me. They've, made jokes about my looks. And what do I care? It doesn't really hurt me or harm me. But if you were to switch the polarity, people would be so outraged.
Right. And this is the thing. One of the greatest tricks any social movement has ever pulled, and that social movement right now being second, and now moving in the third wave, feminism, not the first wave, they should have the right to vote and work, whatever. But I'm talking about the shit we're dealing with now. The greatest trick they pulled was convincing us that they are losing. And so the whole society, even other guys, no one, unless you think about it and you see the numbers, they will convince you that the reality is something else, and you'll fight for a thing that is not true. Remember that? I don't know if you remember that story that came out on Google where they ran the numbers about the wage gap, and turns out they were paying the women more. Right? Like, this is not. It's amazing because you're one of the first guys I've been able to talk to, who is hearing it. Either way, but hearing it and is kind of aware of it from a different angle.
I think that there's some really interesting nuance that's being lost here because, just tomorrow I had to cancel a client meeting, and it's because I got to take my daughter to work, and it's just the way that it worked out. That's just the way that it is. And that's fine because my wife has an important job. I want her to succeed. That's fine. And women do have challenges. Like if you're going to try and breastfeed a baby and you want to make it so the baby for the first year of its life is breastfed, the woman has to get up at 3 a.m. and feed that baby. And then if you're expecting her to go to work and still be in top form, that's a real challenge. And if we do want women in leadership positions that they've earned, not that they've been given because it's some HR policy, then you got to make some sort of accommodations for that. And before I had a child, I really didn't understand this, but it's I don't know how you solve this problem, but you certainly don't solve it by shoving it down people's throats, because that's what it feels like is going on. It feels like people are saying men are all bad. We need, like I saw the other day I was flipping through LinkedIn, and a place that I used to work at had post after post after post of people standing with their photos like this. I kid you not. And they were all taking a pledge for gender equality. So it is just like post after post of people being like, and I was like, this is bizarre. This is like insane.
It's very odd. It's
and it's stripping out all the nuance. It's making it so we aren't having legitimate conversations where we're talking about people that do need to breastfeed shouldn't be knocked out of in the environment. But you also don't want to promote people just because they have two X chromosomes. But if we can't have this conversation, we're only going to be in that exact situation where you were talking about, where we're not going for a draw, we're going for defeat.
Which is kind of what you have to do, because people are really bad at nuance, and I think some of it's intentional. Is in if you simplify an argument to a binary or a digital as opposed to a gradient or analog, then you force someone to make a decision, and if there's only one right decision from a politically correct standpoint, well then you win. So I think there is some intentionality there, but another part of it is that that's a very complex argument, and there's many moving pieces to it, right? Like the whole idea of like I'm a huge fan or whatever that I don't know the term off the top of my head, but the idea that women should have a fairly at least way longer than they have now in the United States, paid time off when they have a child.
Maternity leave.
But it's just maternity leave. I thought it was something else. Yeah, the maternity leave should be way longer. Okay, and the little policy like that, that little change does. That little change takes the sting out of having kids early or having more than one kid. So maybe we get above replacement levels, okay? And people start reproducing. But the way it works right now, because everything is like a battle and no one can sit down and really have these conversations, certainly at least not people that matter who can do something about it, then it's one or the other. And the other thing I've learned too is that people are really bad at second and third order consequences and reactions. Like right there, that was very easy for me to think, okay, well, if there was a longer maternity leave, then you make it more likely that people will have more kids and have them earlier, because no longer it's about choosing career or kids, it's both.
So I'm sure you've heard of the company Monsanto.
Yeah, the food, I mean, or not food, but
the
seed.
ag company. Yeah, seeds. So I used to work there, and they no longer exist. They were purchased. But one of the things that they did, and they actually had a very strong record of women being in definitely middle management, middle upper management, is that they had on-site childcare. And what this enabled moms to do is to bring their kids to work, drop them off, and then when they wanted to do things like breastfeed, they could actually stop by and do this. And it had huge implications, because people would take dramatic pay cuts, would not do other things, because they really wanted to be a professional that was able to get into the regular world, but they didn't want to have to give up everything to make that happen. So they maybe were working in jobs that they didn't love, but the fact that they got to do this made it way better for them. So there's definitely ways around it, but not if it's if we do those binary solutions. Yeah, exactly.
And you know what we're doing here in this conversation. This is, because the counter argument that's often made is, a guy has to sacrifice all this time to get to that position. Why, if you can't make a sacrifice like not have kids, then you shouldn't be there. And we're hearing and we're talking about the negative of that. And when you have some kind of middle ground, some kind of solution that satisfies all parties, you tend to end up with a better outcome for everyone. Like that company Monsanto, they ended up they retained talent. And they probably would court more talent as well, not just retain but attract. And then everyone continues to be the company doesn't suffer productivity issues, and more people are like, oh, I can do this is good, I can have kids if I want and go work here. But right now, humanity in general is just really awful at solving we capitalism in and of itself. And I'm not an anti-capitalist guy at all. I just see it for what it is and recognize some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks. And that's everything. Everything has benefits and drawbacks. But capitalism has taken us very far. One would even say probably farther than we thought it would take us, because when you incentivize people for what they do, they tend to do more of it, and if that is progress, they make more progress, etc. Right? Look at what SpaceX is doing after we basically killed off dreams of outer space travel by defunding NASA like 10 years ago. Now it's all the rage again. But the capitalism, Elon Musk said, I'm going to take my money and spend it here. But what it does is that it makes it, because of the two things it mixes, greed and self-interest, it makes it very easy for a person to only see the most profitable solution instead of the most optimal solution. And sometimes that means giving up dollars but to have a better overall outcome, a more sustainable one. But people don't get it. They don't see it. It's like my coach talks all the time about how cheap boxing equipment has got over the years. But the company that focused on quality, yeah, they got to charge it more. But winning, everyone knows what winning gear is. If you got winning gear, you're serious about your craft, and they have no problems. If you got some BS, I won't name any companies, but if you got some BS, the tears after freaking 50 rounds on the heavy bag and hit you hard, well, it's cheap because they're just trying to maximize profit. You'll come back and buy some.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest problems we have is when people are evaluating capitalism today, they're forgetting two really major changes to it. One is regulation. When we got the SEC involved and we started having it where you have to report your earnings as a public company every 3 months, so you got to do it every quarter. People then start saying look, we're going to lose share price if we don't meet these earnings. So it turned what could have been long-term growth into really short-term thinking. And that's what Bezos did to grow Amazon, was he kept coming up and being like, look, we are not going to keep returning quarter to quarter. It's just not going to look very good. We're not going to have high dividends. Our P&E is going to be not that great. But the over time, it made it a really valuable thing. But many companies are so focused on what are you doing next quarter that they burn the ships this quarter in order to make it happen. And then the second one is companies are so worried about being sued, rightfully so, for any of these challenges, whether it's discrimination, for whether that's gender or race or age or whatever the things are, that they start putting in these really, hardcore bureaucratic things and it ends up that corporations operate like the government, who is only following regulations. And those two things have made people really suspicious of capitalism, when really it's not capitalism. It's whatever you would call that, oligarchy or bureaucratism.
That's probably that's a really good point. It's not the thing that is changed, because capitalism at its core is kind of a human nature thing. I want value for whatever I give you, right? But when you start putting a system to that, then you end up coming up with something else, whether it's you produce all the value, I take it and I don't kill you, serfdom, slavery, or something like that, or it's you produce the value and we distribute it to everyone else, evenly, no matter how much you put in, some form of socialism or communism. Those are all things that we call it. And I think what we have now is something. I guess an oligarchy is closest. The best way to describe it, what we have now, has made people, like you look at the healthcare system, it's made people very angry and distrustful. It's like, what am I getting? Right, that's what it is. It's not value. You're not getting a return on value anymore, right? Because the idea, right, if I spend so many dollars on my college education, right, and this time, my college education is supposed to guarantee me a certain standard of living. That's why I invested in it. It's not supposed to be a bare minimum entry point to a $15 an hour job. That's not what's supposed to happen. But because everyone wanted to go, they just raised the price of it.
Well, and everybody wanted to go because HR needed a way to be able to say, how do we make sure we don't get sued for discrimination? Well, we'll say the only way you can get a raise is if you go get a master's degree. Okay, now let's go get a master's degree. And money flows into the university, so they're happy about it. People pay for it. And then the ones that get it that higher wage. And so we're watching HR, whose only job is to avoid being sued, wreck the system that should be the signals that should be sending people to whether they should go back to school or not.
Peter Thiel has a great talk about the problem with college, and he says it's like two things that shouldn't exist: an insurance product and a tournament. And in insurance, you're trying to minimize risk, and in a tournament, you're effectively maximizing risk. We don't call it that, but we know that first place takes most of it, second place takes a bit less, but still the majority, and then third down, right? Better luck next time. And so you have people that go into it with this insurance mindset. This is going to get me a minimum, and then they get out and realize, holy shit, I'm in a tournament, and I am the same as everyone else. There's no way I can win. So I'm going to settle for leftovers, which usually mean I worked at Starbucks once, and I can't tell you. In fact, I can tell you, my friend, myself, and one other person we were the only people without college degrees or in college when I worked there. Everyone else, I worked with guys serving coffee, man, with freaking master's degrees. Like, what are you doing, dude? Like, that's crazy to me. But that's so common. Go to any Starbucks. Most of those kids got degrees now because they tried to play insurance. They tried to be safe, and they were safe. But because it ended up being a tournament, they were really trying to maximize. Everyone else was taking the exact same strategy, so it became effectively worthless.
Amen, man. Well, we could go on and on forever, but our time has run out. This has been a lot of fun. Ed, if people wanted to learn more about your work, your writing help, some of the projects you work on, how would they go about doing that?
Oh, man, I'm Ed Latimore every place on the internet. My website is edlatimore.com. My Twitter is Ed Latimore. My Instagram is Ed Latimore. My Facebook is Ed Latimore. You just type that in, and wherever you feel most comfortable in social media interacting, or if you want to just shoot me an email, that is how you do it.
Well, we'll have to have you back on, man. We'll have a conversation about chess and all sorts of other things, man. But this has been a blast.
Hey, man, I agree. Thank you.